Now, the Nigerian economy is under pressure of food insecurity, fuel, fertilizer, debt servicing, inflation, and a whole lot more. These headwinds against the country's socio-economic progress are against the backdrop of both domestic and global developments, providing some insights into where we are at the moment and the country's ongoing political process towards a new administration in 2023. I have a development economist, Professor Ken Ife, live from our Abuja studios. Good evening, Professor, and great to have you again on the show tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the whole dollarization and dollar changing hands, whatever. Well, let's defer that a little bit further when we discuss the move towards 2023 and what it means when you talk about dollarizing an economy and what could be done. What did you make of the warning by the IMF on Monday on Nigeria's revenue for debt servicing and the level of rising fuel subsidy that could reach as much as, could be as high as 6 trillion naira?
Well, it's quite apt at the moment. It's the right thing to say, and what they're saying is quite correct. But I wouldn't think that Nigeria is what do you call it? We are not in an intensive care unit, if I may say that. We have embarked on a series of measures anticipating this particular situation, and we have work in progress that would make it unlikely for us to slip into the recession that is being projected. But obviously there will be impact, there's no doubt at all. All the shortage of food, rising prices of food, rising energy costs, they will all have impact. And in fact, you saw, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, JP Morgan delisting Nigeria from the overnight category simply because they couldn't see the high crude price come into the fiscal equation. So that's some of the challenges that we are going to face. But what the IMF says is correct. You know, you can't take anything away from IMF in this particular instance.
So are you worried if our debt servicing increases and we're not getting real accretion from crude oil at $120, $122 as we speak within the last 48 hours? Aren't you worried?
It's very worrying, to be honest. But if you consider that, see, the whole of last year, Central Bank normally would expect about $3 billion from the NNPC coming through the system. But because they did a direct swap, a crude swap with the refiners, we haven't been seeing that. So we've lived with this for a whole year and haven't fallen. So now, in the last 3 months, the JP Morgan reacted to this, but we've been living with that. So it's very, very difficult time for us in terms of forex revenue, granted that about 80% of our forex comes from oil. So we are having to manage to find whatever we can to support the forex, without what is going to come from crude. We're not seeing the excess crude account benefit significantly from this. All we are seeing is, rising costs that translates to higher subsidy requirement. Initially, earlier on, it was, well, have your crude, give us PMS, whatever change we'll get, we use it to pay subsidy. Now it's moved away from that to the point where they're now asking government to bring 1.2 trillion to subsidize, and now asking government for 4 trillion for subsidy. And I know by next year, it may even go to 6 trillion. So that is a very, very worrying side of this. And I think we'll have time to talk about alternative ideas on what we could do.
What alternative ideas would you want us to bring to the table?
Well, I think that equation is not sustainable. I think we have to, if you look at the causes, there is a huge aspect of this to do with the fact that the host communities are still agitated and restricting production onshore, not so much offshore, but onshore. And if that is part of the case, then we have to think of a longer-term way of handling these issues. And this is why I kept saying that we should begin to think of valuing the assets of NNPC with a view to taking this to the capital market, so that I reckon that it will be worth more than 50 trillion compared to the 30 trillion that is in the capital market. So if you add that, our whole capital market will take a big... But if we can float and then the government releases about 40% of their share to the public and let that public be the host communities, the labor union, the transporters, the oil companies, every Nigerian that wants to buy, so that Nigerians are involved in the running of this thing, and then as shareholders, they could demand higher efficiency scrutiny and then more corporate governance. And if they feel comfortable about being co-owners of this facility, I wouldn't see why they would go and start destroying the facility. If you have interest in it, you wouldn't be going around to destroy those facilities. And it's a different ball game. And if the owners of the company, the shareholders, decide that they will forfeit their dividend for subsidy, then let it be their decision. But I doubt very much if that is what they're going to opt to do. So we're going to have a much more friendly environment for processing and exploiting our oil and gas resources if we open this up and stop this hemorrhage. We are dragging the economy to a halt by asking government to go and find 4 trillion. How can we borrow money to service consumption?
At the level of 6
trillion,
trillion,
money to put in production.
At the level of 6 trillion naira, you think the economy will be in an intensive care unit?
I'm not sure what the revenue position will be by then, because there's an aggressive program from the Ministry of Finance to raise revenue. It's called the Strategic Revenue Mobilization Initiative. So that is, to move from 7% of government revenue being 7% of the GDP to 15% of GDP by next year. That may, if that happens, then the 4 trillion may not be as harmful as it could be.
But I'm sure you agree we need to depress that figure. Whether it's going to be harmful or not, we need to depress that 4 trillion. It's not a good figure by any stretch of imagination. If government makes more revenue, if the Ministry of Finance makes more revenue, we shouldn't be pumping it, flushing it down the toilet. Well, let's expand the conversation into the 2023 general elections.
I agree with you.
And the quest for food governance, good governance, food, everything in between. Stand by Professor Ken Ife and everyone. This is RS Exchange. We'll be right back into. Okay, let's continue this conversation with Professor Ken Ife, a development economist on Nigeria's social economy ahead of the 2023 general elections. Professor, I will just finish talking about fuel and all of that, but let's talk about food. The United Nations country representative says an estimated 80 million Nigerians face food insecurity. And the EFDB and other international organizations such as the IMF and the World Bank have predicted a looming food crisis for sub-Saharan Africa. So what's your take on this? Do you agree with those numbers that as much as 80 million Nigerians are in over imminent food crisis?
We've always known that 40% of Nigerians are living below the poverty line, and which is just about 80 million. We've always known that over the last 2 years. But the thing is that does not translate to people dying because of food insecurity. We've not had that at all. If we didn't have the aggressive program on Anchor Borrowers program and all the investments going into agriculture, then more people would have died in our country than the COVID-19 and the war in all the 6 geopolitical zones put together. So we are not in that net, to be honest. We are doing all that is humanly possible to ensure that the agricultural production system can withstand the challenges of insecurity, as well as engage technology, mechanization, and seed technologies and all of that to produce not only what we need to consume, but what we require as industrial raw materials to process and add value. So programs are out, honestly, that are aggressively dealing with the 3 levels of food production, food processing, and then export market. So we have separate different programs for that. All we just want to do is let the government put more resources on this and let's encourage more domestic investors to get involved.
Considering the expected headwinds, we talk about debt, inflation, exchange rate, a lot of headwinds on the Nigerian economy. What are your thoughts on the level of economic transformation that needs to be in place under the new administration? By this time next year, we should be everyone should be getting ready to swear in the new president and commander-in-chief and his team.
Well, what I haven't been, a lot is being said by the candidates on what their economic blueprints will look like. But I need to hear more about how they will address revenue generation, because at 7%, government revenue being at 7% of our GDP is just a no-go. We can't be number last in Africa. So we need to move to 15 or 18%. The average is 18%. Even the ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria puts it at 20% minimum. So we need to ramp up our revenue. And I want to hear more suggestions from the contenders on what they're going to do about revenue. And of course, what they're going to do about the cost. Nobody's talking about how they're going to get around this subsidy that is trying to eat everybody up, from 1.2 trillion to 4 trillion and possibly going to 6 trillion by the time the new president is going to be sworn in. So we need to hear more about what they want to do. And of course, address what I've just mentioned, whether they don't think that we should have a much more creative, because I've looked at the Act, the PIA Act. I looked at the exclusions. I saw the exclusions in the Act in the area of the authority, midstream and downstream authority, and the exclusions clauses on the upstream commission. All of those clauses are excluding Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 from being relevant or being applicable to this. So there are lots of questions about the level of transparency, accountability, and prudence in the management of these resources, because they've excluded the real instrument that we are using across the country to drive revenue things. So it remains to be seen how this is going to play out. That's why I'm going to the other way around to say, let's get more people involved. Let's get the citizens involved so that they can use the angle of corporate governance and then to put pressure on the management to deliver.
So when you talk about the citizens, where should the focus be? Perhaps that's what you are hitting right on there about when you talk about good governance. All focus now, roughly 100% focus is now on who becomes the president, not who becomes the vice president, not who becomes members of the House of Reps or the Senate. And we need all these structures together to work to bring good governance and deliver on macroeconomic transformation as well as growth. Are they mutually exclusive or inclusive, as it were? Give me your thoughts on this, because we need that good governance, but it's not a one-man show, as it were.
Correct. The leadership, I mean, there are social and political leadership and there's economic leadership, but we need more on the economic leadership, because the challenge that we are facing, besides insecurity, are hugely economic in nature. But having said that, you require a team. It's not, you require a team. You have to be, the president has to be a team player. First, you want to get the right people, square holes, square peg in square holes, on round peg in round holes, and then get a team that will work with you to actually reach the delivery side of it. There are very good visions, there are very good papers, very good programs, but the delivery is only as good as the quality of the drivers who are driving this. So I think we need to see more about what they're going to do with the critical problem of how are we going to raise revenue? How are we going to cut down on the leakages? We are going on that with the leakages. Over almost $8 billion a year on illicit transfers. And so many holes to be plugged. And then how do we actually deliver those programs we think would return us to fiscal stability, that would reduce the level of borrowing, that will bring more revenue on stream, that will increase more productivity on the agricultural phase. We're doing well on the upside. Our PMI is 55.8, which is good, moving from 54 to 55.8, which shows that the domestic manufacturing sector is moving. We need to get more domestic investors. After all, Dangote is putting $19 billion. It's not a foreign investor. But we have more domestic investors that need the confidence to put their hand in their pocket and invest their money. So we need to get them on board. And there are good signs, with Dangote Refinery coming in the next few months, that will change. And then the aggressive push by the Ministry of Finance on revenue mobilization and the strategic revenue. So and then of course they did the Finance Act 2021, which is a good thing of this administration. Every year they bring in a Finance Act 2019, 2020, 2021 to roughen the edges and then keep making sure that we are putting the focus on how we generate more revenue, reorganize FIRS, get more automation on the system, reduce the leakages. Some of those people who are under, coming in out of the country, coming in and out, and not paying tax and all. So they are plugging a lot of these holes and bringing more. So that has to continue. That needs more impetus, so that while you are talking on the production side to deal with security, food security and nutrition, you're also providing, reducing the waste. So on both counts, you achieve more convergence in our approach to economic sustainability.
All right, we thank you for your time tonight. As always, Professor Ken Ife, do have a great evening and see you next time.